I was just a simple teacher who married a dad in an old car, but 3 days later, a bank teller revealed his millions, and his family's torment and trouble began. Can you imagine the gut punch of realizing your new husband has been hiding something colossal? I was barely married, sitting in a bank, when a teller gave me that look and casually dropped a bomb. Your husband really didn't tell you? My whole world spun on its axis. What on earth was she talking about? And why did it feel like my entire relationship was suddenly built on quicksand? I walked into that bank branch on my lunch break, thinking I was just doing a simple errand. 3 days earlier, I'd married Daniel, a quiet, kind man with a beat-up Ford Taurus and a sweet daughter. Our wedding was small, sweet, and exactly what I wanted. Now, Daniel had just handed me a debit card, telling me to buy whatever you want. I'd laughed, because who says that? But I figured, hey, he's my husband, I should know what account it's connected to. Normal stuff, right? Then came the teller. She looked at my driver's license, then at the card, then back at me. Twice. That's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Is there a problem? I asked, trying to sound casual. She just gave me that polite bank smile, the kind that means you're about to hear something you really don't want to. Your husband really didn't tell you, she said, her voice soft. My heart hammered. Tell me what? She hesitated, then started typing. After verifying my social security, address, and signature, she confirmed, okay, you're listed as a joint account holder. Good, I thought. At least he got my name right. Then, she turned the screen towards me. I looked, and then I looked again. My brain simply couldn't process the number staring back at me. I leaned closer, counting digits. No, I breathed. The teller didn't say a word. I recounted, my fingers trembling slightly. Millions. Millions of dollars. Not business assets, not real estate, just cash in a regular checking account with my name on it. My jaw went slack. I sat back, utterly speechless. The teller lowered her voice. I'm guessing this is new information. I shot her a look that probably said it all. Lady, I teach 4th grade. If I'd known this yesterday, I wouldn't have packed leftover meatloaf for lunch. That actually got a small laugh out of her, and I needed it because all I could think about was Daniel, my husband, the man who drove a beat-up 2004 Ford Taurus with a cracked bumper, the man I'd once offered a coupon for tires, the man who let me split dinner checks for almost a year. This was him? I walked out of the bank in a daze and sat in my Honda, engine off, just staring into space. Then I called him. Hey, he said, sounding normal. Too normal. Daniel. I managed, and something in my voice must have caught his attention. Yeah. What exactly do you mean? I asked, my voice dangerously even. When you say you work in commercial property? Silence. Not a long silence, but long enough for my blood to run cold. Then, where are you? Outside the bank. Another pause. Don't drive. I'm coming. He hung up. I just sat there numb. Honestly, a year ago, if you'd asked me if Daniel Bennett was rich, I would have laughed. He didn't look poor, but he definitely looked ordinary. And ordinary by 37 was exactly what I wanted. I was tired of dating games, of men who called themselves financially independent then asked me to pay for their Uber home. I had my own life, my elementary school teaching job, my modest townhome, my quiet Friday nights. Then Daniel showed up. More accurately, he kept showing up late to pick up his daughter, Sophie, who was in my class. He always looked a bit rumpled, always apologized for traffic, driving that faded blue Taurus that smelled faintly of coffee and crayons. When people asked what he did, he'd just say, commercial property. I pictured leases and maintenance, nothing glamorous. The first time we really connected was when Sophie got sick. He arrived, tie loosened, looking genuinely scared. She okay? He asked. Fever, but she'll survive. She's also furious because I told her she can't go to soccer. He just nodded, that dry, quiet humor already there. Sounds like her. That was Daniel. He waited until summer to ask me out. Coffee turned into dinner, dinner into weekends. He wasn't traditionally romantic, no flowers, but he remembered I hated cilantro. He was just good. Good with Sophie, good to me. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed trouble. When he proposed a year later, He mentioned his family had money in commercial real estate and that he needed a prenup. My attorney reviewed it, confirming substantial assets. I thought, okay, comfortable, very comfortable, maybe. But 8 figures? Millions in a regular account? Never. 20 minutes after I called him, that ancient Taurus pulled into the bank parking lot. I watched him cross toward my Honda. A man worth more than I could imagine, wearing a shirt I'd bought him on sale. He opened the passenger door. I didn't say hello. I just looked at him. Start talking. He sat down, hands on his knees, looking exactly like the man I married 3 days ago. Same rumpled shirt, same scratched watch, same little crease between his eyebrows. It was almost infuriating. Claire, he started.
No.
Don't start with my name like that. He nodded. Okay. Start with the account. He exhaled. The account is ours. I added you after the wedding. I gathered that, I said dryly. Finally, I pressed, Daniel, there are millions of dollars in there. I know. That answer snapped something inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just this awful, cold clarity. You know? And you thought maybe I didn't need to. No, that's not what I thought. Then what did you think? He rubbed his wedding ring. I thought I would explain everything after the wedding. I turned to face him fully. After? That sounds like there was something to explain before. He met my eyes. There was. My arms crossed. Go ahead. He told me everything. His father's company, Bennett Commercial Properties, had grown from a single warehouse into a massive empire across North Carolina and Virginia. Daniel owned a controlling interest, plus other investments. When he said 8 figures, I blinked.
8.
He nodded. I just sank back into the seat. Daniel, I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. You let me buy you tires. His face tightened. They were good tires. That is not helping. I know. You let me negotiate a tire rotation for you. He actually looked ashamed. That was a bad day. I stared at him. Then I laughed. A hard, brittle laugh. Because if I didn't laugh, I might have screamed. You let me split dinner checks. Because I thought you were raising a kid by yourself and scraping things together. I never said I was scraping things together. That did it. No, I said, turning completely to him. You just watched me believe it. He went quiet. And there it was. The part that truly mattered. Not the money, not the car. It was the fact that he knew what I thought and he had let me think it. I wasn't testing you, he said. I didn't say you were. But you're thinking it. I'm thinking a lot of things. Fair. I just looked out the windshield. Why? I finally asked. He took his time. My first marriage. I knew he'd been divorced, knew his ex-wife lived in Charlotte. When I was younger, he said, I talked about money too much. Not bragging, just... I didn't understand how unusual it all was. People treated me differently. Women sometimes did too. After my marriage fell apart, I stopped leading with any of it. So, you downgraded to a Taurus? I asked, a hint of sarcasm. That wasn't part of a plan. I moved into a smaller house because Sophie was 6 and I wanted her somewhere normal. I kept the car because I liked it. I raised an eyebrow. That is the least believable thing you've said so far. He managed a tiny smile, then it vanished. I wanted a quieter life. I didn't want Sophie growing up thinking every relationship came with a financial calculation attached. I understand that, I said, holding up a hand. But that doesn't make what you did okay. The relief on his face vanished. Claire, privacy, I said, cutting him off, is what you keep from strangers. I'm your wife. He looked down. I know. No, I said firmly. You know now. That landed. We drove home separately. Daniel pulled out a chair for me at the kitchen table, like we were about to negotiate a peace treaty. I sat. He stood at the counter. If you want, he said, I can take you off the account. I stared at him. That's your solution? No, I just mean if it makes you uncomfortable. It's not the account that makes me uncomfortable. He nodded. Right. A minute later, he said, your Honda's getting old. I closed my eyes. What? I'm just saying, if you want a new car. Daniel.
He stopped.
You really think the car is the problem? No. You literally just offered me a car. I know. Please stop trying to spend your way out of this. That was the first time I saw him truly embarrassed. I took the debit card out of my wallet and placed it on the table.
He looked at it.
Keep it.
No.
It's yours. And that's not why I'm giving it back. He nodded slowly. I know. I pushed it towards him. I need to understand what our marriage actually is before I start spending money from it. He sat across from me. Then he said it. We probably need to talk to my mother. My stomach dropped. Why? And Vanessa, his sister? I'd met them both. Margaret, elegant and controlled. Vanessa, sharp, asking if I wanted dessert in a way that made me wonder if dessert was a moral failure. What do they have to do with this? Daniel hesitated. They knew, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He didn't answer. They knew I hadn't told you everything. Everything meaning how much money you have. Yes. I stared at him. Who else knew? He looked utterly miserable. That was answer enough. I laughed once, a choked sound. So, I was the only person at my own wedding who didn't understand the financial situation? That's not fair. No, I said, my friends don't know details. But your family did. Yes. And they knew I didn't. Yes. That was worse than the bank balance. The entire past year rearranged itself in my mind. Every polite smile, every careful question, every time Margaret had asked what I planned to do after the wedding, I thought she was making conversation. Maybe she had been taking inventory. Dinner with them happened that Sunday. Margaret served roast chicken in a dining room that looked like nobody had ever spilled anything in it. Vanessa arrived late, gave Daniel a kiss and me a long, assessing look. We made it through dinner before she finally said, well, Daniel looked up. Vanessa took a sip of wine. I suppose the secret's out. I put down my fork. Daniel said, Vanessa. I looked at him, not her, because that word bothered me more than I expected. Secret, not privacy.
Secret.
Margaret tried to change the subject, but a few minutes later, she looked at me. You're still planning to teach, I assume? I met her eyes. Yes. She nodded. Of course. I waited. Why wouldn't I? Her smile was small. No reason. There was absolutely a reason. And for the first time since the bank, I understood that finding out Daniel had money was only the first surprise. The next one was finding out what his family thought that money would turn me into. Margaret didn't call me a gold digger. I almost wish she had. It's an insult you can answer. It's much harder to argue with a raised eyebrow and a perfectly reasonable question. So, you'll stay at the school? She asked. Yes. For how long? I looked up from my coffee. For as long as they continue paying me, I suppose. Vanessa smiled into her wine glass. Margaret ignored her. I only meant that you have options now. I had options before, I pointed out. Of course. There it was again. Of course. Everything Margaret said sounded gracious until you listened to it twice. We'd moved to the den after dinner. Daniel was beside me on the sofa. Vanessa across from us. Margaret by the fireplace. Margaret asked if I planned to sell my townhome. Vanessa asked if we'd renovate Daniel's house. Then came questions about travel, private school for Sophie, my retirement account. By the fifth question, I put down my cup. Is there something you actually want to ask me? The room went absolutely still. Daniel shifted beside me. Margaret said, Claire, nobody is interrogating you. I didn't say anybody was. Vanessa crossed her leg. You have to admit your circumstances changed rather dramatically this week. No, I said, my voice firm. My circumstances changed when I married Daniel. My information changed this week. That shut her up for about 3 seconds. You signed a prenup? She finally asked. Yes. So you knew what? What Daniel had. I knew his family had substantial assets. Vanessa gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, which irritated me more than if she'd just said it. My attorney reviewed the agreement, I explained. I knew Daniel owned interests in family companies and real estate. I knew those assets would remain his. I didn't take every commercial building listed on Schedule B, Research its market value, multiply it by Daniel's ownership percentage, and create a spreadsheet called How Rich Is My Fiancé? I was deciding whether to marry your brother. I wasn't valuing an acquisition. Daniel made a noise beside me that might have been a cough covering a laugh. Vanessa did not find it funny. Margaret folded her hands in her lap. I'm sure you can understand why we're cautious. Daniel has been through a difficult divorce, she continued. And Sophie has to come first. Of course she does. Vanessa added, things can become complicated when significant assets are involved. I looked at her. Are you worried I'm going to steal the shopping centers? Claire, Daniel said quietly. No, I insisted. I'd genuinely like to know. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Margaret stepped in. Nobody is accusing you of anything. That sentence always means somebody has been discussing the accusation extensively. I turned to Daniel. Did you talk about this before we got married? His expression changed just slightly. That was enough. Daniel, my family had concerns about me, about the situation. I laughed once. What situation? He lowered his voice. Me remarrying. That isn't what I asked. Margaret said, Claire, this isn't productive. I looked at her. With respect, Margaret, I just found out 3 days after marrying your son that everybody at this table knew something about my marriage that I didn't. I think I've earned one unproductive conversation. Nobody had much to say to that. We left 20 minutes later. Daniel waited until we were in the car before speaking. They weren't sitting around plotting against you. I didn't say they were. You're acting like. He stopped himself. That was smart. I looked out the passenger window. Finally, I said, did they think knowing about your money would change me? He kept his eyes on the road. My mother worries. That isn't an answer. Yes. I turned towards him. And you knew, too. I watched him. Then, why didn't you tell me? His jaw tightened. I already explained that.
No.
You explained why you don't tell strangers. You explained why you don't advertise it. You explained why Sophie doesn't grow up in some gated mansion. You haven't explained why your fiancé wasn't allowed to know.
Allowed. Fine.
Trusted.
He flinched at that. Good.
I wasn't testing you, he said. Then why does everybody act like I passed? He had no answer. The next few days were strange. Not terrible, just strange. We went to work. Sophie stayed with us. I made spaghetti. He forgot Parmesan. We watched half a movie, both pretending we weren't thinking about the same thing. Then, Thursday evening, I asked about his first marriage. Not the polite version, the real one. He sat at the kitchen island while I put away dishes. You told me money changed things, I prompted.
It did. How?
He was quiet for a while. His ex-wife, Melissa, had wanted more. A bigger house, more travel, the lifestyle Daniel had grown up around. They fought over spending. But the more Daniel talked, the less clean the story became. Margaret had distrusted Melissa from the beginning. Vanessa had questioned every purchase. Melissa eventually started fighting back. Daniel's response had been to withdraw. I didn't want to take sides, he said. I stopped, a plate in my hand. You were married. I know. So there weren't 3 sides.
He looked at me.
I was trying to keep the peace. I put the plate away. You weren't neutral, Daniel. You just made sure nobody could blame you for choosing. He went very still. I regretted the sharpness for maybe half a second. Then I remembered the bank. Later that week, I saw an old wedding photograph at Margaret's house. She couldn't have been more than 22, looking nervous and beautiful beside Daniel's father. On the drive home, I mentioned it. Daniel smiled faintly. Granddad hated that wedding. Why? He didn't think Mom was good enough for Dad. Seriously. Wrong family. Not enough money. All that nonsense. I turned toward the window. Interesting. A week later, Margaret asked Daniel to review the family estate plan. Sophie should be protected, I said. But if anything affects my rights, I want my attorney to review it. Daniel agreed immediately. Margaret did not look pleased. 2 days later, Daniel got a call about a Bennett family meeting. What time? I asked. Thursday at 4. I can leave school by then. He hesitated. You don't need to come. I looked up. Why? It's mostly family business. I thought I was family. You are. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He rubbed his forehead. It'll just be easier if I go. I studied him. Easier for whom? He didn't answer. I didn't tell him not to go. I didn't demand an invitation either. I just picked up my coffee. Go. He looked surprised. I'm not asking you to fight with your mother, I said, meeting his eyes. I'm asking you to notice something. Whether keeping the peace means sacrificing me. For once, Daniel didn't have a careful answer ready. And that worried me more than if he'd argued. Daniel came home from the meeting at 6:15. I remember the time because I was draining pasta, and Sophie was trying to convince me that 9x7 was somehow open to interpretation. The garage door opened. Daniel walked in, loosened his tie, kissed Sophie, then me. How'd it go? I asked. Fine. One word. Fine. If you've been married long enough, or taught children long enough, you know fine means additional questions are required. What did you discuss? The trusts, some company stuff, Sophie's inheritance. Nothing we need to worry about tonight. That last sentence bothered me. Not because I thought Daniel was lying, but because I was beginning to recognize the way he told the truth while quietly removing the parts he thought might cause trouble. So I didn't push. Not that night. The next evening I asked again. Did Vanessa say anything about me at the meeting? Daniel looked up from the mail. Why? That isn't a no. He put the envelopes down. She had some concerns. What concerns? The same ones. Say them, Daniel. Please. He rubbed the back of his neck. She asked whether you really had no idea about the money before we got married. I waited. And what did you say? He looked towards the living room. Sophie was upstairs. Daniel. I told her you didn't know. Something in his voice was off. When he frowned. What? When did you tell her? He didn't answer. That's when I knew. I put both hands on the kitchen counter. What did you say when she first asked? Nothing. Not right away. I stared at him. How long is not right away? Claire, it was a couple of seconds and then I said, I didn't think you knew. I actually thought I'd misheard him. You didn't think I knew? I worded it badly. You've known me for more than a year. I know you married me. I know. You were the person withholding the information. I know. And when your sister suggested I might have secretly figured it out and married you anyway, you had to think about it. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I nodded. That's worse. His face changed. What is? You said nothing. You were caught off guard. No, Daniel. Vanessa accused your wife of deceiving you. And for a few seconds, you considered whether she might be right. I didn't consider it. Then why didn't you answer? He looked exhausted. I don't know. That, at least, was honest. I went upstairs. I packed enough clothes for several days. Daniel followed me into the bedroom. What are you doing? I'm going to Ruth's. Claire, come on. I need some space. Over 2 seconds. I stopped folding a sweater. No. Over the fact that you're still measuring me. I'm not. You are. Your mother does it out loud. Vanessa does it with that face she makes. You do it quietly, which somehow makes it harder to see. He sat on the edge of the bed. I love you. I know. And I did. That was the miserable part. If I hadn't loved him, the whole thing would have been much easier. I zipped the bag. When I came downstairs, Sophie was standing near the bottom step, looking at my suitcase. Where are you going? I glanced at Daniel. To Aunt Ruth's for a few nights. Ruth wasn't actually her aunt, but Sophie had started calling her that months earlier. Why? Your dad and I need a little time to work something out. Her eyes moved between us. Daniel said, Soph, you're okay. Children know when adults are using the word okay because nobody is. I hugged her. I'll call you tomorrow. She nodded. I left before I could talk myself out of it. Ruth lived 15 minutes away. She took one look at my bag and said, Guest room's clean. Wine's questionable. Perfect. She didn't interrogate me. That's why we'd been friends for 17 years. The next morning I went to school. 4th graders have a wonderful ability to make your private crisis irrelevant. By 9:10, I was mediating an argument over a purple mechanical pencil. Life kept moving. That helped. The hard part came that evening. Sophie called. We talked about school, then she went quiet. Claire? Yeah. Are you still my stepmom if you don't live here? I sat down on Ruth's bed, my throat tight. Oh, sweetheart. Because Madison's stepdad moved out, and now she doesn't see him.
This isn't about you.
I know. No, I mean it. Whatever your dad and I are working through, none of it is because of you. But are you still my stepmom? Yes. The answer came easily. Then she asked the harder question. Are you coming home? I looked at the wall. I don't know yet. She was quiet. But I'm not disappearing on you. Okay. After we hung up, I sat there for a while. That was the first time I understood that whatever decision I made about Daniel wasn't going to affect only Daniel. 3 days later, he came to Ruth's. He brought no flowers. Good start. Then he ruined it. I could pay off your loans, he said, sitting at Ruth's kitchen table. What? I've been thinking. You shouldn't still be carrying those. And your Honda is 11 years old. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, he looked almost hopeful. You keep trying to fix the only problem we don't have. His shoulders dropped. I don't know what else to do. Tell the truth before I have to drag it out of you.
I am now.
After. He looked down at his hands. Then, slowly, he started talking about Melissa. Really talking. He admitted his first wife had made bad choices with money, but Margaret had distrusted her before those choices. Vanessa had questioned her constantly. And Daniel had stood between them, telling himself he was keeping everybody calm. I thought staying neutral was the responsible thing, he said. You weren't neutral, I reminded him. I know that now. You chose whichever side asked the least courage from you.
He looked at me.
This time he didn't argue. A few days later, Margaret called. She asked if we could meet privately. I almost said no, but curiosity won. We met at a quiet restaurant. Margaret arrived with a leather folder. That should have warned me. She waited until we'd ordered coffee, then slid it across the table. What is this? A proposal. I opened it. Legal words filled the pages, but I understood the number. It was substantial. Very substantial. In exchange, I would agree to additional limits on future claims involving Daniel's family assets. I looked up. You're offering me money. I'm offering certainty. For whom? For everyone. I closed the folder. Does Daniel know?
No.
Of course he didn't. Margaret folded her hands. Eventually, Claire, money changes everyone. I thought about that old wedding photograph. The nervous young woman standing beside Daniel's father. Did it change you? For the first time since I'd known her, Margaret's expression slipped, just for a second. Then it was gone. She didn't answer. I took the folder with me. I wanted my lawyer to see it. Back at Ruth's, I put it in the dresser drawer. I stood there, hand on the handle, and thought, Daniel doesn't need to know yet. It sounded reasonable. He was already fighting with his family. Telling him would only make things worse. I could wait. I could decide when the time was right. Then I heard the sentence again in my own head, and I realized, with considerable annoyance, that I was starting to sound exactly like my husband. I kept Margaret's folder in Ruth's dresser for 2 days. That's not a long time. Unless you've spent the previous month lecturing your husband about withholding information, then 48 hours starts to feel surprisingly educational. I had reasons, good ones, too. Daniel was barely speaking to his mother. Sophie was unsettled. I hadn't decided what I thought about Margaret's proposal, much less what I wanted to do about it. Telling Daniel immediately would only create another explosion. That's what I told myself. Then Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee at Ruth's kitchen table when she walked in, bathrobe-clad, and opened the refrigerator. You tell him yet? I looked up.
No.
She took out the cream.
Why?
Are you thinking about taking it?
No.
That answer came quickly. Ruth poured coffee. Then what are you thinking about? I opened my mouth. Nothing useful arrived. Ruth nodded. That's what I thought. I hate when you do that, I grumbled. I know. She sat across from me. I'm not telling you what to do, but you've spent 3 weeks furious because Daniel decided what information you needed and when you needed it. I'm aware of the irony. Good. Saves time. That afternoon, I called him. Can you come over? He was there in 20 minutes. I put Margaret's folder on the table. Your mother gave me this. Daniel opened it. I watched his face as he read. By the second page, his jaw tightened. Then, he saw the number. She did what? Keep reading. He didn't. He reached for his phone. I put my hand over it. Don't. Claire, she offered my wife money too. I know what she offered. This is insane, Daniel.
He looked at me.
She gave it to me Thursday. His anger stopped cold. Thursday? Yes.
Why didn't you tell me?
There it was. A completely fair question. I almost wasn't going to. His eyebrows lifted. Why? I sat back. Because you were already dealing with your family. Because Sophie's upset. Because I thought telling you would make everything worse. And I paused, taking a breath, because I told myself I was protecting you. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then I said, that's when I finally understood how easy it is to call secrecy protection. Daniel looked down at the folder. I'm sorry. So am I. It was the first conversation we'd had since I left where neither of us was trying to win. That mattered. It didn't fix us, not entirely, but it mattered. Over the next few weeks, Daniel did something I hadn't expected. He stopped making promises. Instead, he started making appointments. He found a therapist. He told Margaret and Vanessa he would no longer discuss me with them unless I was present or had agreed to the conversation. And when Margaret tried to argue that she was protecting Sophie, Daniel told her protecting his daughter did not require treating his wife like a pending lawsuit. I heard that part later. He didn't call me afterward expecting praise. That mattered, too. One evening, he came to Ruth's and sat with me on the porch. I need to say something, he began. Okay. I don't need you to prove you don't want my money. I looked at him, surprised. He continued. I think I did before, even if I didn't admit it to myself. I'm sorry. That one hurt, but it also helped because it was true. I know, I nodded. Still, I wasn't ready to move home. A week later, I met with my attorney. Not because I had decided to divorce Daniel, because I hadn't. I wanted to know what a separation would actually mean if we couldn't repair things. Daniel found out because I told him. We were having coffee when I said, I met with Susan yesterday. He knew who Susan was.
His face changed.
Your attorney?
Yes.
About the prenup. About everything. He stared into his coffee. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Are you leaving me? I don't know. I expected an argument or panic, or at least after everything I've done. Instead, Daniel swallowed and nodded. Okay. That was all. Okay. It was strangely painful and strangely comforting. For once, he wasn't deciding for me. A few weeks later came the Bennett Family Foundation dinner. I almost skipped it. But then I realized I would be staying away because Margaret and Vanessa had made me uncomfortable. I was tired of arranging my movements around their comfort. So I went. Daniel and I arrived together, not hand in hand, but together. Margaret greeted me politely. Vanessa managed almost 40 minutes before she couldn't help herself. We were standing near our table when someone complimented my dress. Vanessa smiled. Well, Claire's had quite a change in circumstances lately. It was subtle enough that the other woman probably didn't catch it. I did. Daniel did too. Vanessa, he said. I touched his arm. No, it's okay. I looked at her. Your mother offered me quite a lot of money a few weeks ago. Her smile disappeared.
What?
Margaret, standing nearby, went very still. I didn't mention the amount. I didn't need to. Claire, Margaret said. I'm not trying to embarrass you. You have an interesting way of showing it. Probably. I looked around the small circle of family members near us. Everybody in this family keeps asking what I do for Daniel's money. Then I looked at Margaret. Nobody ever bothered asking what I do for Daniel. Margaret's voice tightened. I was protecting my son and my granddaughter. I thought of that photograph. You told me once that family protection mattered more than hurt feelings. It does. Daniel told me his grandfather didn't want you marrying his father. Margaret's expression changed. Vanessa looked at her. I continued carefully. Someone once made you prove you belonged in this family. Margaret said nothing. And instead of making sure nobody else ever had to feel that way, you made it a family tradition. For the first time, Margaret lost that polished calm. You have no idea what I had to put up with. Her voice wasn't loud, but it shook. He thought I was after the Bennett name. He had people check my family. He told my husband I would leave the minute something better came along. I spent years proving him wrong. I nodded. I believe you. That seemed to surprise her. That's why I thought you'd know better. Margaret looked away. No dramatic apology followed. Real life rarely schedules those on cue. Then Daniel spoke. My mother isn't the only one who owes Claire an apology. I turned toward him. He wasn't looking at Margaret.
He was looking at me.
Claire didn't deceive me. I let her marry me without fully understanding an important part of my life because I was afraid knowing the truth might change her. Vanessa started to speak. Daniel held up a hand. And when you questioned her, I hesitated. That's on me. Nobody said anything. Vanessa left before dessert. Margaret stayed, but she barely spoke. I didn't feel triumphant. I mostly felt tired. But for the first time since the bank, I didn't feel like I was standing in a courtroom where everyone else had already seen the evidence. Outside the hotel later, Daniel walked me toward my car. Are you coming home tonight? He asked. I looked at him. Not tonight. The hurt showed on his face, but he nodded. Okay. No bargaining, no promises, no offer to buy anything. He kissed my cheek and walked toward his car. I stood there, watching him go. And the strangest thing happened. For weeks, Daniel had been trying to convince me to come home. That night, he finally stopped. And for the first time, I found myself seriously thinking that maybe I would. I didn't go home the next morning. I feel like I should make that clear. Daniel finally did one thing right, and I did not reward him with a suitcase and a romantic reunion before breakfast. We weren't 25. We had a marriage to repair, a 9-year-old watching us closely, and enough unresolved baggage to fill the trunk of that Taurus twice over.
So, we took our time.
Daniel kept seeing his therapist. We started couples counseling with Dr. Feldman, who had an unnerving habit of waiting 3 seconds longer than any normal person would after asking a question. You'd answer, she'd keep looking at you, then somehow you'd answer again, except truthfully. Daniel hated that. I found it useful. At our 3rd session, he said, I was trying to protect Claire. Dr. Feldman waited. Daniel sighed.
Fine.
I was protecting myself. She looked at me. I smiled. I like her. Daniel muttered. Of course you do. I wasn't innocent either. I had made assumptions about him from the beginning. The car, the house, the way he dressed. Daniel had allowed those assumptions to stand, but I had still made them. And when Margaret gave me that folder, it had taken me exactly 48 hours to discover that I, too, could make withholding the truth sound noble if I chose the right vocabulary. So, we worked on it slowly. I moved home about 3 months after I'd left. Not because Daniel asked me to. Actually, by then, he'd stopped asking. One Saturday morning, I packed my things at Ruth's. She stood in the doorway. You sure?
No.
Good. If you were completely sure, I'd worry you'd learn nothing. That was Ruth. When I walked into the house, Sophie came flying down the stairs. She stopped herself just short of tackling me. You're staying? Yes, for real. For real. She hugged me tightly. Daniel stood behind her.
He didn't say anything.
He didn't need to. A few weeks later, Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen counter while I made dinner. Mom, where's the... She stopped.
So did I.
Her face turned pink. I mean, Claire. I went back to chopping an onion. Either one's fine. There was a pause. Then, very quietly, okay, Mom. I kept chopping. I wasn't about to turn around and make that poor child responsible for whatever my face was doing. Funny thing, I had seen 7 figures on a bank screen and recovered faster. The financial part took time, too. My attorney reviewed everything. Daniel's business interests stayed his. Sophie's inheritance was protected. My retirement accounts and earnings remained mine. We created a joint household account that we both understood, right down to the boring details. There were no allowances, no tests, no surprises. Daniel once joked that our monthly financial meeting was less romantic than he'd imagined married life would be. I told him financial transparency was very sexy. He said, "Please never say that again." Margaret and I took longer. We didn't become best friends. I didn't want that ending, and I doubt she did either. About 6 months later, she came by one afternoon to drop off something for Sophie. On her way out, she stopped at the front door. "I misjudged you." I waited. That seemed to be the whole apology. "You did." Her mouth tightened slightly. "You don't make things easy, do you?" "I teach 4th grade. Easy people make me suspicious." To my surprise, she almost smiled. Then she left. That was enough. Vanessa took considerably longer. Eventually, I stopped keeping score. That helped more than anything Vanessa did. And then there was the Taurus. That stupid car survived all of this. One afternoon, about a year after the wedding, I finally asked Daniel why a man who could buy almost any car he wanted insisted on driving something old enough to vote. We were in the driveway. He ran his hand over the roof. "My dad bought it." I assumed someone did. He ignored me. It was his last everyday car before he got sick. After he died, I kept it. Sophie remembers him picking her up in it. I looked through the back window. There were still faint crayon marks near one door. Suddenly, the car looked different. Not valuable, but important. "You could have told me that," I said softly. Daniel gave me a look. "I'm getting better." "You are." 6 months later, the transmission died. Daniel came home from the mechanic looking like he'd lost a Labrador. I tried to be sympathetic, I really did. "You know, you're allowed to buy another car." He stared at me. "That's not the point." I waited, then started laughing. He frowned.
What?
"Oh, now you know that sentence." He understood. "That was one time. You offered me a Honda. I offered to replace your Honda during a marital crisis. It needed brakes." I laughed harder. Eventually, he bought a sensible SUV. He complained about it for 6 months. The original debit card stayed in my dresser for a long time. Daniel found it one Sunday while looking for batteries. "You know you've barely used this." "I buy groceries." "Claire, what do you want me to do? Order a yacht." "I'd settle for something you actually want." A month later, I found it. Not a yacht, a table. We were at an estate sale in Chapel Hill when I saw this enormous, old, solid wood dining table. It had scratches down one side, a water ring near the center, and enough where to make Daniel suspicious. "You like that?" "I do. We own a table." "I like this one." He looked at the price, then at me. "With everything you could buy, this is what you want." I ran my hand over one of the scratches. Apparently, I have a type. His eyes narrowed. "I like things that look cheaper than they are." He closed his eyes. "You're never letting the Taurus go, are you?" "Absolutely not." We bought the table. It's still in our dining room. Sophie did homework there. We had Thanksgiving there. Margaret has eaten at it many times without once mentioning the scratches, which I consider evidence of substantial personal growth. I'm 45 now. When I think back to that morning at the bank, the money is almost the least interesting part. It exposed things. Daniel's fear, his family's suspicion, my assumptions, and eventually my own ability to justify keeping something back because I thought I had a good reason. Money didn't create those things. It just turned the lights on. Daniel and I are still married. Not because I proved I wasn't after his money. I stopped proving that a long time ago. And not because Daniel became perfect. He didn't. Neither did I. What changed was that he stopped treating trust like something I had to earn while he kept all the information. And I learned that independence didn't mean refusing everything somebody offered me. It meant being able to say yes or no without owing anyone my dignity in return. Every once in a while, Daniel still asks why I agreed to that first coffee. I always tell him the truth. "You asked?" "I thought, why not?" He hates that answer. "That isn't romantic."
Fine.
"You had a great car." He gives me the same look every time, and I laugh every time. At 37, I'd stopped looking for the one. Maybe that was why I finally saw Daniel for what he was. Not a bank account, not a Bennett, not somebody who could rescue me. Just a tired single dad standing beside an embarrassingly old Ford. asking if I'd like a cup of coffee. I said yes before I knew what he had. Years later, after I knew exactly what he had to decide whether to say yes again. The second yes was the one that mattered. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to know what you would have done in my place. Seriously, drop a comment below.